Good deal. You're up, Leo.
Thank you, sir. All right, my name is Leo Foley. I'm with Bean Strength Gym. I just thought about when I said on my phone, I thought, you know what, it'll go off for some reason.
And I'm Gene Halsey. I also work for Bean Strength Gym.
So, like Gene said, so I'm a senior vice president for VNK, and I'm the project manager that was involved with this project. And Gene's a civil engineer, future star for VNK. So that's kind of the main two you're going to hear from today. More from Gene than from me. On this study, which everybody knows was a BRIC study, which is funded by the BRIC grant program. And we had two other significant people helping. One was Tom Kirking, who, very young man, he's about my age, and he worked for the Corps of Engineers for about 30 years. He's worked for VNK for about 10 doing hydraulic modeling, and that's about all he does. And he did all of the hydraulic modeling, so you'll see all that. And then Chris Parizek, who used to work for the state NRCS type program, and she's done a lot of these kind of small green infrastructure projects, and still does. For us, she does them primarily under the SRF sponsored projects. So you might have heard of that program. So she does a lot of these kind of projects. And then Leon Freeman, who also used to work for the state, what's the name of the organization that runs BRIC? Homeland Security. Now called Homeland Security. Leon used to work for them, and about 2 years ago he came to work for us. But he's pretty good with the cost-benefit ratio type stuff. So you'll see some of that we did. And Leon helped Gene with all of that. So with that, we were going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. I don't think you guys have a copy of it, but in general, it's going to be up on that screen. We're going to be looking at the study area. We're going to look at the format of the study that you have. So you already have a copy of the study. We're going to look at the hydraulic modeling, the GIS, and the restoration. Kind of a quick look at that. That restoration toolbox is something that Chris put in the RFQ, and it was something you have to do in order to be able to get to the BRIC funding. We'll look at all the alternative projects and practices that Gene addressed, and then we'll look at which ones became viable, which ones we thought were viable projects that would solve some of your problems, and also ones that would have a positive BC ratio. BC is the benefit cost ratio. And part of that is this flood damage evaluation. Which houses can you get out of the floodplain? Which houses don't flood if you do some of these practices? That's a big deal. And then how does that benefit cost ratio work, and then what are the next steps? With that, Gene, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. So I assume everybody here's probably read the report all the way through already, right? All of it. Yeah. Okay.
Cover to cover, Gene.
All right. This will be easy.
Good stuff.
All right. So yeah. So it's if you really just want to get acquainted with it, the summary will kind of tell you what's going on, and then we have it broken down into the appendices. So going through, we've got the H&H study, which is the hydrologic and hydraulic study. That was pretty engineering heavy. The GIS analysis that we used after that, the Iowa River Restoration Toolbox. We've got a little bit about the literature review, and then the final piece will be the FEMA CBA information, which that might not be on the draft report right now, but
it's gonna come. It has to be. This is the meeting for discussing that, so
Right.
we can get into the report for some.
yes. So going forward, this is kind of the area we're looking at. You got Mud Creek there on the right, and then the tributary that we studied kind of cuts through on the south end of town there. We start here with the FEMA, the flood insurance study. They've got some information that we used to kind of get this whole study going. This is kind of an overview. Don't worry about all the details on here, but it's just kind of showing you the black lines there. It's the boundary of the watershed. So any of the rain that's fallen, it's making its way to the tributary.
All the way around here.
Yep. So starting up in the ag land up there to the south, crossing over 218, cutting across town, and then eventually making its way out to Mud Creek. So we got the H&H study part of the report. We created some computer models to show the tributary basin and how it reacts to 10-year storms, 100-year storms, 500-year storms. So these are the levels of flooding that you would expect once every 10 years, once every 100 years. Whether that's what actually ends up happening, as you guys are probably familiar, as you've heard, a 100-year storm kind of seems to be hitting you a little more frequently than you would like, but
Twice a year.
yeah.
You don't have to worry about us, Wes.
Oh, yeah, no, you're fine.
You're fine.
You're fine.
Yeah, get in Bud's way, I don't care.
I'll just stare at Leo's face.
No.
So going forward with the GIS analysis, we kind of took the models that we had and looked at what structures are being affected under each scenario. And then the river restoration toolbox, we kind of walked the channel, took a look around at everything, documented what was going on, looked at, any erosion. Kind of our assessment was that the channel is a grass channel, it's not really a stream per se, so kind of limits us going forward on doing kind of any sort of stream modification, which makes it a little simpler too. And Chris's main recommendations from walking through, she's done a lot of agriculture type engineering too. Just kind of continue maintenance on things. The grass channel's in pretty good shape for the most part. And just kind of, as you have some erosion, clear it out, plant some new grass, just keep everything flowing and maintained. Here's this map again. So starting upstream, up there in ag land, we're going to go through kind of all of our mitigation alternatives that we investigated for the project. So up there, the first one would be detaining water upstream of 218. The next one is kind of looking at that wetland basin that is now filled with water, thankfully. Then we also looked at drainage improvements over on 2nd Avenue. And we looked kind of over at the 10th area around 10th Avenue, which is currently in ag land. So the first one, detention upstream of 218, so it's just detaining water around that field before it goes into town.
More or less, that one's a watershed evaluation that captures the flow prior to getting to the town and does a detention basin, more or less. A little bit bigger than the one that's in town itself.
Yeah, and similar kind of what you guys have that you built a few years back is this wetland basin. I'm glad to see it kind of filled with water after this rain. So yeah, it seems to be doing its job. But we also kind of had a few concerns about how it was ended up being constructed. I know it wasn't completely to design as far as what you guys wanted out of it, but we would recommend maybe some minor upgrades to it to make sure that it's doing its job 100% of the time.
Part of the upgrades were to try to make sure we could get more water to it. And then do some channelization to get the water to it a little easier. And then how does the water flow out of it afterwards?
Yeah, so somewhere in here you said, we're gonna cut the channel back into it like it was originally designed, so it's actually flowing through the pond and then back out. Right?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
For all of you who read that, I'm sure you noted that.
It would flow in like it did before, but still the outlet would have a different outlet that would detain the water.
Next strategy we looked at was some 2nd Avenue improvements. So the existing kind of culvert span right there is a little undersized, so we were looking at increasing the size of the opening there, either with a bridge or some additional culverts.
that your
convey some more
driveway?
water.
It's my driveway.
Yeah, I was talking to him when I was out there, so.
So there's,
I snapped a picture.
there's a lot of things along with either putting a bridge that has a bigger opening or culverts with bigger opening. You've got driveways, you've got a road that you have to work in. And in the report, you'll find where they did cost estimates that are fairly detailed that show all of that work, so that you'll see when we get to cost benefit ratio, this costs quite a few dollars. So there's benefits in there, but we'll get into the costs a little more.
And then the final one we looked at, as a viable alternative would be, kind of that ag land around 10th Avenue, you know, depending upon what, you know, what's feasible, you know, between everybody. But kind of maybe detaining water down there or leaving it as an open space, maybe possibly what do you call it, an agricultural,
Set aside things.
yeah. Just kind of keep it open. You know, kind of, you know, you build a house and you kind of want to limit some of the development in the floodplain so you don't have more future damages. And then we looked at a bunch of other things as well, just kind of crossed them off as far as, you know, what was feasible, what was cost effective. Looking at, you know, regrading the whole channel didn't seem to be cost effective. It works pretty well as it is, the existing channel. You know, if you go mess with it, you're just maybe creating more erosion problems in the future, so. We looked at doing another diversion channel to the south, maybe like kind of over by closer down by the wastewater treatment plant. So that didn't really seem to take anybody out of the floodplain. And then also we looked at enlarging some other culvert openings. So we looked at like C Avenue and 10th Avenue, I think. And the problem with that is that actually if you open some of those up even more, you're just increasing flooding downstream and then making more problems for somebody else downstream.
So in other words, the channel size as it is, or actually those bridges and those structures are acting as a dam.
Yeah, they
in
are.
other words.
Yep, they're controlling some of the water. So in some cases, it's kind of helping with 10th Avenue and C Avenue. It's kind of beneficial, but the 2nd Avenue one actually, widening that channel or that opening more actually ends up taking more houses out of the floodplain. So that was the only one that was actually a beneficial opening. So you can go either way with that kind of stuff. So yeah, and then looking at, this is from the report, this would be with the GIS analysis, we looked at all the pink, those are all the parcels kind of through town. And then we kind of have a bunch of structures in there highlighted.
And this one is existing, so there's none of our improvements are shown here. This is just what you have currently during the flood.
Yeah, so this is kind of what we would expect for the extent. So I think the one on top there, there's kind of 3 shades of blue going on. There's 10-year, 100-year, and a 500-year flood. And we've got different kind of shadings. I don't remember what all the colors are off the top of my head, but different structures depending upon if they're going to be affected in a 10-year flood or one color, and then I think it's the purple ones are all kind of more on the outskirts where you would maybe assume they would be affected by a 500-year flood, but not in the other flood scenarios. And then this one's similar map, just kind of barely changes. This is if we did an upstream detention kind of by 218 there. So this is holding back some of the water. And we can look at, you know, how many structures did that take out of the floodplain. And so I think this one is just the total structures that are affected under current conditions. So we looked at the 10-year floods on the left, 500-year floods over on the right. I think we got like 8 residential structures and 4 residential structures in the 10-year flood that we would expect to.
For commercial.
For commercials, yeah. For commercial, and then I think some of them might be city property too, but, and then increasing the flood event, you're getting more property. That's effective.
It looks like 47 in the 100-year, 47 residences in the 100-year, and 7 commercial, and then 79 in the 500-year, 79 residences and 8 commercial. commercial side, going from 7 to 8 from 100 to 500 isn't really that significant, but going from 47 to 79 would be significant.
What's your letter say, Doug? You had to be protected to the 100? Is that what that guy said? When you first got your letter, say, hey, you need to raise up your whole property or something?
Yeah, FEMA usually works with the 100-year
Yes,
flood.
to get out of flood insurance, you have to raise it up to the 100-year, usually it's 100 plus 1 foot.
Is that what they told you?
I don't recall.
I just remember the letter when you called me and said, hey, I got this letter.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of people try to get out of flood insurance by saying we'll raise the structure so the first livable floor is 1 foot above the 100-year flood.
And you used to do
But-
Lomas, right?
And Loma, if the city did a Loma,
A letter of map amendment.
right, and I've done a number of them, but what that does is try to take the entire area out. For instance, it says, okay, that if the city or something happens, now this whole area. So if we did some of these improvements, the city could come back and do a Loma and get everybody, all, say at 47 to take all 41 of the houses that are in there, if we could potentially get them out.
And you don't really wanna do a Loma one at a time.
No, you do not.
Alright.
So this is everything, that we modeled. We can go to the next slide there. It's
Well, all of
kind
this
a lot
one,
of information.
all of this one is doing is looking at each one by one by one,
Yep.
of all the things that he looked at.
So this is kind of just the same thing. This is 500-year flood. It just kind of shows you the most difference between each flood scenario, right? So this is each scenario that we ran through the models. So we've got the existing conditions over on the far left. I think we got the 218 detention is the next one down, and then just kind of going from there. These are all the things that we modeled. You can see that some of the scenarios reduce the number of houses in the floodplain, and then some of the scenarios actually increase them. So
And Gene, I'm asking a question, I don't know the answer, but I think when it comes to the brick benefit cost ratio, are there benefits above the 100, between 100 and 5? I think there are.
I believe so. The more information.
Matter of fact, I know it now,
Yeah.
because Davenport, we're doing a flood protection project around their wastewater treatment plant. It's already protected to the 100. Because of the Mississippi River problems recently, we're going from a 100 to a 500 with a brick, we put a brick application together. We did a study and then an application. It has not been approved yet.
Yeah, Leon says that you can, he has something to argue that, yeah, you can kind of look at these 500-year events and really kind of maybe treat them as a more significant, effect on, how you approach things, so. For recommendations, these are kind of just the general things. Continued maintenance of the channel and structures around there. Just modernizing existing stormwater infrastructure. If you could flip a switch and update everything to be more modern, like you're gonna decrease the area, the extent of what your floodplain is gonna be, right? But, you can't fix everything overnight, so, just kind of keep addressing things as you move forward. Kind of limit development in the flood-prone areas. And then Tom also, our hydrological engineer, kind of had a recommendation of updating the FEMA flood insurance study too, possibly.
Because they did not include our existing improvements that we did.
Well, what was funny is we started out using the old flood insurance study and got Tom very nervous, and he's like, well, we better get that new one. And then he got the new one and found out that they hadn't included the improvement anyway, so. That's something we could
And
do.
we actually responded to them that they had included that. And that was part of your letter that you got, that we said, hey, we did this improvements to try and get you out of that. Yeah.
Other recommendations.
Oh, yeah, and then these are the ones that we have been going over, let's see, we got the retain the water upstream, kind of modify the existing wetland basin, increase some flow through underneath Second Avenue. Probably the biggest issue with that one though is in the confines of this study with the brick money, FEMA doesn't like to see, increased conveyance of stormwater flow.
Yeah,
They'd
they'll
rather-
push it somewhere.
Yeah, they'd
want you
rather
to
see
move
the
it, yeah.
detention, yeah, so they score it unfavorably. Leon was saying that it's not impossible to get brick funding for that, but I don't know if he said he'd never seen it or maybe seen it once, you might be able to do it if you piggyback it onto other projects.
We're gonna get to that here in a minute with the BC ratio, if it's wanted, and we'll show it without some of our recommendations. We think this is a good project to do some good, but is it exactly fit the brick mold? Not really, but there's other things we could do, we'll get there.
And then, yeah, the last thing we looked at was the benefit cost analysis. So taking all the structures that we looked at that were affected, you know, that we're assuming are being affected based on our models. Kind of, we tally up the square feet of living space, kind of assign some standard damage costs, kind of get some factors, figure out what construction costs are on these different strategies. Put this all into the FEMA BCA calculator, and then they compare the costs of the mitigation strategy over time, so they're applying, you know, some economic principles to, you know, evaluation and all that. And they spit out a BCA ratio. And so a BCA ratio greater than 1 means that the project is cost effective, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's FEMA wants to invest in it, right? So over a 1.75, keeping the BCA ratio over that is what you kind of want to see to keep moving forward.
You get federal funding,
Yeah.
which it's going to be, if you do get that BCA 1.75, then it would be a breakdown of 75% federal, 10% state, and 15% local here in Iowa.
Yeah, I believe it's
Facts, that is true. The 1.75 too really comes from the person that we got from Homeland Security who's looked at how they rate these. And he pretty much says there's so much competition that if you're below 1.75, you're just not gonna get funding. It's still considered a good project, but you're not gonna get any funding. So that's what we keep in our mind. Let's try to get it above there.
Yeah, so, yeah, there's some other, BCA calculator does kind of take into some other effects. You got social benefits, right? You know, somebody loses their house, or maybe they're taking time off work, you know, there goes maybe a kid's college fund or something, you know, so it's, you know, they account for some of that. Utility disruptions, you can account for some of the city costs too, which, you know, so if you guys have, you know, overtime and equipment usage and stuff that you tend to have during a disaster, you can justify some of that into there too. Then it's also looking at ecosystem services, you know, so cleaning water, detaining some of that storm water from downstream. So.
A little bit of this is a black box type of thing because what they're trying to do is standardize it so that every consultant doesn't put their own little flair and try to do. So there's a lot of standardization in here, but it's kind of crazy. You put it into it and it spits out a number for you, and you have to dig hard to figure out what's making it move and what isn't making it move. It's all because they're really trying to make sure everybody's doing apples to apples in the program. All right, so let me talk about this a little bit. This is what I call the black box benefit cost calculator. I've done a lot of these in my past with the Corps of Engineers because the Corps, every project in the Corps has to go through similar. FEMA has their own style, as always, with everything. So the four big what we call alternatives or practices are on the left side. So some kind of a the first one is the Mud Creek tributary Second Ave improvement. That's the bridge, right?
Yes.
Sorry. So then you go to the right, and you can see that the cost of that is, I'm sorry.
Oh, we're on
Which one,
So-
your Second Avenue one?
second. Yes.
2.9 million?
Yeah.
Oh, I probably updated that since then. Are you looking at the report there?
So what do you?
I've changed some of them.
Oh, you
Okay.
Because they-
Oh.
Now it's 3.4
Yeah.
million.
They didn't have the,
You're gonna update that
I
the
didn't
right
put
way.
the, total construction engineering fees and all that.
thought it was just my eyes, but you saw 2 point something earlier, I bet you're crazy.
Right here.
You're nuts. Okay.
I'm sticking with this paper.
I apologize for that, guys. Yeah.
So there is
That was
a-
my old one.
And there is some details in the report that's gonna show you the backing behind these numbers, but on this one, let's just say that is it 3.4 now?
Yeah,
So
that's
$3.4 million.
Every,
So that's that's that project by itself. By itself with all of the road work that's needed, the driveways, whatever, is a $3.4 million project. This is some pretty rough estimating, we're not down into the gnats behind yet on that, but it's looking at other projects similarly and what did those cost and how do we get to where we got. And then what the benefits are, we have to put some information in and it calculates out the benefits. So if you went over to the side and just did that project by itself, you'd have a 0.32 BC ratio, and that's not gonna go anywhere. So what a lot of times people do is they package these mitigation strategies or these practices together. So then you go down to the next one, which is the existing wetland retrofit. So now you've got your wetland and your retrofitting. And there's a cost again to that. And then the BC ratio is something over 2. Which by itself, that might not be a fabulous project, but for FEMA, they certainly like that. That's one that would fit and they'd be very interested in that. Then you go down to the third one, which was the 10th Avenue wetland. And again, these wetlands, as you can see, what Gene said earlier, the road by itself scores very low. Maybe if DOT had this, it might score much higher, but since it's a FEMA project, it scores lower. But again, this wetland down, the third one down, has a very nice BC ratio above 3. And then the upstream detention, again, is a nice project. That one, again, very high cost, $7.5 million, because you have property, you have basically having to create a detention area out of nothing. And you're talking everything you'd have to do to get that there. But again, it scores well and it gives them quite a few benefits. So what we looked at doing is let's package the whole thing together. Every one of these 4 that we think have good benefits and put them together. And you have a BC ratio somewhere about 2, but of course the cost is 18 million.
18.6.
What's that?
18.6.
18.6, so that's a lot of money. So then we said, okay, let's go to the next one. What if we start, and you can play, that's what this program is made for, is to start to cut some of the things out. Oh, sorry about that. So this next one, down at the bottom of the page, we just looked at the existing wetland retrofit and the 10th Avenue wetland. And the other 2 we got rid of. So now you've got a BC ratio over 3. And I thought this one, which one did we cut out? I thought you cut the road out of one.
we did that down on that one. Yeah.
We
The
cut,
road's cut out of that one.
but
And also the upstream one.
but we can,
Yeah, I didn't do one more yet. But similar story,
we could take the road out of one of them and still be, if you take the road out, your BC ratio only goes up, no matter what else you do. But if you want the road in, you almost have to do everything else to get your BC ratio above 2, So that, we just wanted to, before we started doing any of this, finishing it, we wanted to kind of talk to you about like what are viable, are any of these ideas even viable to you guys? And I'm not asking you to say, yes, I want to fund them, but we can recommend almost anything within these 4 and get it funded. No, I'm sorry, not get it funded. Get it so it will be competing very well for funding.
On the national level.
Yes. The state of Iowa has never had a brick project funded for construction yet. Not one.
But these scores.
They feel like the one in Davenport and this one, if we would get it, have potential and more potential than others. So it's not like they would be against it. And when the brick application goes in, that's kind of the next steps. that's not really your application, it's the state of Iowa's application. And you are giving them this engineering report that we're doing, and then they will come back at us for a lot more other detail, but they put the application together with more detail. They'll take our report, and the report basically says, does the state of Iowa wanna stand behind this or not? I'm pretty sure they will, but, they'll need you to, say the city to sign off and say the city is very, very interested and would fund their part, that type of thing, if it got funded. So those are the things, and we're not asking for an answer tonight, we're just telling you that those are the things you need to think about before we button this up and send it in.
So the mitigation on the west side of 218.
They took that file.
So that's how that.
Just to demonstrate.
That we were just demonstrating how that tool works. I've seen it with each one of them, and I think even we can put that in the report.
But I assume you'd want it up above 3 more than above 2.
Yeah.
I would prefer it at 3.
So that means you're losing that one and losing the Second Avenue Bridge. My concern is the 10th Avenue wetland appears to be digging out all of Weese's farm fields. Which I think the
Yeah.
last time they said if I wanted to test them, it was gonna cost me $26 million.
Yep.
That's a problem. So that's, which
That was
one,
10 years ago prices, so I'd hate to think what.
which one is that one? Is that the upstream one or the
That's
one?
the downstream.
The
That's the two next to the ball diamonds.
I wondered about the upstream one also. I wondered if, there's potential, and we didn't get into the right of way and talking to anybody or anything like that, but again, that's when you have to buy was the right of way in the cost?
For the 10th Avenue I did, but I didn't put any $26 million.
That's,
Oh.
that's just the number we got told.
Usually the
Yeah.
way it works is you find out what property like that has gone for over and over and over again, and you present that to the property owner, and they tell you you're crazy, and then you tell them that's what we have to pay as something above that, and usually it's a negotiation. I just had one on the Mississippi River where the owner told him it was $250,000, and it appraised for $5,000, and the owner ended up settling at like $12,000 for that property. So that's
The last one we bought, from Helmer.
Oh, you're talking about for the wastewater
Yeah,
treatment
for all
plant.
of Marvin Lindsay for the
It came out
wastewater
to be
treatment.
11.9 or 12,
Yeah, something
right?
like that.
12.1 per acre.
per acre.
Yeah, 12,100 per acre.
That's a good price per acre.
Yeah, it was.
That's a
Something
good
we
price,
had to have,
but you have to have it, right. So.
and they knew it.
Oh. It's not the same.
So this is kind of where we kind of stopped at this point and said, let's go get some feedback and decide where do we go from here with this. The next steps too is, let's just say that you decide, hey, we really wanted the bridge and 2 of these wetlands, and it's gonna come out at 2.6 or 2.3 or something for a PC. That's fine, we can go forward. But at that point, we have to come back to you, usually I have to sign something like a letter of intent. Then we send it in, and then, if the state takes it on, they come back to you and they'll ask all kinds of different questions about your funding capabilities, all this kind of stuff. They might have us even do more modeling, because they might wanna see different things, but all that type of stuff is on that, what I would call those next steps. And I've been through it twice now with Davenport. They did a complete application, and the application's pretty healthy. And then they send that in, they have a lobbyist, Davenport has, that reviews it and puts words in there to help get some of their congressional people to help out. And then they also, FEMA has their people look at it and put words in there to help out, because they're all trying to get it funded. And that one did not get funded, but they said, change all this and resubmit it next time. And that's exactly what we did, and we haven't heard back yet. So it's a complicated thing, but I do think that the state of Iowa really wants to get one funded. There's not many states that haven't had one funded, and they really would like to get one funded. And that's why they're doing this. This is, I think, Chris, I'm not sure.
Oh, I do.
Is this considered a demonstration?
This is a demonstration.
And a lot of states don't even do it, but Iowa's doing these demonstrations, trying to get something moving.
That is-
So on Plain Chalk, the downstream wetland is not an option probably. The Weeses,
You got on the outside.
downstream.
Outside.
I mean, I just,
Because of the land cost.
Yeah.
Understand?
Maybe something to look at too with that would be, some sort of trust, agricultural trust too, I don't know if that would,
Oh, wait a minute, you're talking about the one that we're saying downstream, maintain
Yeah.
open space?
with the billboards, right, they don't make those.
Yes, that one.
yes.
Well, we would take that one out probably, no matter what, yes.
And we go across the road, across.
Yeah, 'cause we own the other side.
We own the other side of the road.
Let us look at
We don't
that.
own that side, we don't own the west side of the highway or that gravel road, we own the other side.
But what we already have is the retaining pond that is semi-used.
I don't think you've had any issues since we put that in, have you?
No.
It seems to
I
be
mean,
that.
a heavy rain like what we had this past weekend,
Mm-hmm.
that would usually fill the creek. Without the retention pond that's there now, a rain like we had this past weekend would have filled that creek up to our property line. For,
What did it do?
what's that?
What did it do?
What did it do?
Yeah, what, I mean,
Oh, now?
Yeah.
I don't think it even came halfway up to our property line.
that's news I've heard in a long,
That is
long,
so
long time.
awesome.
Well, yeah, I went out after that rain, I did go out.
Yeah.
And like you and I watched that one night, that wall of water come down through Weese's and then went over the walking trail thing and then under and I did not see that at all. It was down.
And I think what I'd heard from our hydraulics is it works very well for this kind of storms and for, but maybe not at the 100 and the 500 years.
Right.
That's
If
just-
it-
But
if
which
it
that's
has
understandable, but to
sustained-
be honest, I've done a lot of 100-year, detention basins that I get almost everybody and their brother saying, it never fills up with water, it's so oversized, it's ridiculous, but it's made for the 100-year storm.
Yeah.
So we can't modify what we have to make it even work even.
Yeah, that's in there.
That's what
That's
we were
one of
thinking,
these.
modify it by keeping the current structure of helping, but then when a bigger flood comes, also protect. That's what the recommendation on that one is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
'cause
that
we-
cost of, that one's manageable, that's like $380,000.
Yeah, cause he said, and it wasn't put in the way we first
Correct.
received it.
But why is that a possibility now? To put it in, okay.
I'm not quite sure why they changed it the last time, but we didn't have any say in the change.
No, we sure didn't.
Was
We
it
didn't have
all of a
to-
sudden,
we have a say in
was
the
it-
design. Because it was it wasn't a FEMA grant,
No.
it was a HUD grant.
Right.
Okay.
It was actually, funding from the Rockefeller Foundation that was supposed to be for Superstorm Sandy. That is kinda like a game of Plinko, we fell right in the right area because we were declared a disaster area because of the derecho. And that made us qualify.
So I'd be very interested in that, but obviously, but the score on that alone is probably not something that FEMA's interested in.
No, it's a 2.08.
It's above the
Something
one.
Yeah,
added
you
on.
can see what it is by itself on the top, on the very.
Okay, I see.
So.
But may I approach? Here's the video. Before the retention pond was put in, and you can see the creek right to the side of our house is coming up to the property line.
Yep.
Since that's been in, since the retention pond been in, we haven't had a lot of rain.
Yeah.
But there was just as much rain that fell this past weekend that would have done this than it didn't. So the retention pond that's there is doing its job.
That's awesome.
That's good. That's what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
In some
I think I showed this to Gene when he was out at the house.
Doesn't really count for that.
Don't forget, all that
So why
depends
would
on the
we-
river level.
see if we can get that far?
Well, I would think, yeah, like
There's
make
some
the
ponds
intent.
not ran at all.
The others, I
How does the
think,
river level?
they're not in love with making the water flow through faster.
Which you would, but you'd have to have Reese's detention
Yes.
ponds to make it work, and we're
Exactly.
never going to get that.
Never
So the cedar fills Mud Creek on the lower side.
Yeah, so those, that 10th Avenue detention thing, that's we'll never get that property.
Okay, yep, understand that.
Unless it goes across the highway.
I think that one,
Across the road.
I really do think that really our recommendation on that one was to just try to make sure people don't build there.
Right. And with our current flood, because that's in the city limits, with our current ordinance that we just passed, this past year, there won't be anybody that'll be able to build it.
Yeah, 'cause we had to get something special just for the school to do their little addition because it's in the floodplain.
So the upper.
So if you took that one out and did the other three, you're still gonna be well over 2.
And the other three being the upstream,
218 retrofit Second Ave.
do you have money in there for that property acquired? Acquisition at that,
For the upper.
Upstream one.
Oh, for the upstream one? I believe so.
It looks
or
like
is that one
And I
gonna
think-
lower you down?
But we don't have a desire to do Second Avenue one because again, if we're not putting in the lower wetland,
It's gonna push it on through and you just said that one doesn't score.
that doesn't, they don't
Not by
like.
itself, it doesn't score very well. That was the
Well,
second
that
one.
one, if you
opening
take the
up.
average, it's gonna lower your average quite a bit.
Well, to me, if you do the improvements upstream, you don't necessarily have to widen.
And what Gina said too is if we do the improvements to the downstream wetlands that's already there, then possibly you can take that upstream one and make it a little bit smaller and all of that and save a little money there and your BC ratio could go up.
Gene, we discussed possibly, looking at a state grant, like an STP or something like that for the Second Avenue
Yeah.
improvements, rather than going through FEMA, looking at DOT money for doing those.
And that's
type
a-
of improvements.
What I said earlier, where DOT would look at that a little differently. That's probably a really good idea too.
Well, Dean came up with that.
I think I saw you guys were, you got your name in for, I don't remember if it was, and maybe you guys have this allocated somewhere
An
else.
STP?
But I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's West First right now. But that money goes into a pot every year anyway to help build it back up, so.
So I'm trying to figure out here, is which one would we wanna go for? I mean, if we can't, Second Avenue's gonna drag you down. You got 0.32 as a benefit ratio, right?
Yep.
So if you're gonna add that onto 10th Avenue, so you're gonna lose your highest player. If we do the 0.32 at 208 and 173, you're gonna be below 2.
You should have brought your computer.
Yeah,
That's really easy to do.
Yeah, cause they're kinda weighted, so it's,
It's
yeah.
really easy
It's
to do.
just
You
not
can't
as
just
simple.
average them or, yeah.
So when you were saying that, take the highway, take Second Street out,
Yep.
leave in the existing wetland retrofit,
Yep.
leave in the upstream wetland.
Yeah, cause at one time, they said they'd do an.
So just look at
So
those
I was
two
gonna
by
ask, is that
themselves.
something that-
On the
They
west
haven't
side?
talked to them. Are they still interested in doing that?
Well, that's not long.
They're both over 2 by themselves, right? Those two?
No, your upstream's at 1.73.
And I think we could bump that ratio up, I believe.
I
They
just,
came in and talked to us.
they haven't for a long time.
We might as well have
Yeah,
a
it's been over 5
conversation.
years.
Yeah, and we did.
It's been a while.
Should've.
Too small.
That's at 1.73.
But that could be
That could be,
changed.
that could be bumped up.
Yeah, I just know your tech is, that's just a no-no. It'll never happen.
I agree.
And I don't see the Second Avenue.
Well, I think like Chris says, let's push it back onto a step or a.
I'm just thinking, like Gene was, on this.
So we're kinda down into the two middle two, if you wanna see how, right?
Yeah. Why don't we can run that and show it to you tomorrow.
You're on B and,
B and D.
B and
Two.
A, B, C, no C. B and upstream,
Andy, I don't know.
That's what I'm looking at.
and see what those go.
B&D, and it'll come.
That'd be closer to.
And then do a,
Yeah, it would be for us.
Yeah.
hold on, just thinking about second still, running it through my head. Because it heads towards the fairgrounds anyway, wouldn't that possibly be a good be a candidate for farm to market road rather than.
Is it on the farm to market road map now? That's what you have to figure out, cause if it's not, anymore they make you give one up.
Right.
They make you trade.
Trade miles
Yeah.
elsewhere. I'm thinking 13th is on the farm to market road.
It is, cause that's where we
Yeah.
moved it
Yep.
to, so we can get funding.
Exactly.
So as soon as you get funding, you move it to
You know what? You sound like Coralville.
Hey, I'm just saying the truth, that's what we
But
did.
that's what they do. You gotta have a county engineer that's willing to work with you to do that.
But if the fairgrounds are there, the county engineer might be very interested. Don't know. But I like the idea of the B and D, of trying to come up with that and package that.
I think that's gonna be your best
I do too.
chances for the city to be able to acquire, and we can't even guarantee we're gonna acquire that one on the other side of 282.
I also think it's gonna get you a good BC ratio, and I think that it's the kind of project FEMA wants to see. You know, it is the kind of thing they're looking for.
Yeah, you might have to go talk to the
Mhm.
OCA.
We can do that. Well, let's see what everything comes back at.
Yeah,
What does B and C gain the city?
it's gonna gain you more capacity downstream. And hopefully.
And it takes
And
out,
then if we can
It
redo
takes
the
out-
Loma,
it's gonna take out like, I don't know, is it 15 houses, something like that. It's not a huge amount of houses. It's not like Chicago where they're taking out, 1,000 houses. But it is gonna take out, you might know the exact number, something like 15 houses that would be out of the 100-year floodplain.
So this allows the city then to file a LOMA to take the cities out of the flood,
That's what we're
the
trying to
residences out of the floodplain.
Correct.
And we don't have,
Since this has all been about you, Doug, and hopefully get your.
Oh, when you call the mayor at 6 o'clock in the morning and he's on his way to work that you got a letter, your house has to be torn down, that gets people a little excited in this particular house.
But I answered.
You did. You did.
I do remember that.
So that was another thing, our GIS map, we wanted to be able to show, because I know FEMA was saying exactly what houses, where are they, and all that. So it is in the GIS part of this.
and our capabilities with this kind of modeling is, we don't have the surveyed out exactly what everybody's first floor elevation is and all that, so there, this is what we're expecting. So it's, it might vary a little bit, but we are seeing that there's, you do this, you're gonna bring those floodwaters back,
So
right?
have you talked to Craig Just down at University of Iowa? Because they did some modeling on that property on the other side.
Oh, we did talk to Craig Just, Tom Kirking, remember, because early on in the study, we did, Dr. Just, I forgot about him, yeah. Yes,
Yeah, 'cause he had his students come out and do a whole bunch of modeling.
right,
That'd be a wealth of information.
yeah, he's a smart dude. I think there was there was 2 studies on this that we saw.
Yeah, I think he did 2 of them.
One of them, I think they ran around town to try to find some green outhouse type things, and then they modeled that one up north, because that's back when we were talking to the boards.
So you're saying at the
Fair
one,
amount of time ago.
the downstream wetland one, across the road,
What's that?
is that you said in the area where the downstream wetland was on the other side of the road?
No, so I'm talking where we got our existing wetland, you're talking about doing that upstream mitigation.
Yes.
That's the one they did some modeling on.
Okay.
And then we weren't even considering anything downstream because we know we couldn't buy anything on the one side. But if there was a chance that you'd move it to the other side of the road, of the gravel, whatever street that is, 25th,
Yes.
we own that property all the way down to the wastewater treatment plant.
Well, we'll look at that.
What's the timeline for you to get all of this?
Well, that's coming up on your agenda.
That's a great question, because I think I tried to get a extension,
That's on.
and they said, oh no, you don't do that, only he can do that.
And then I noticed on there it had a mayor signature.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, it's up to you guys to be
But I think we've already kind of turned in enough information, they know you're going down, what they don't wanna think is that you're just not doing anything, you know what I mean? So, I think if we get that, month or two,
Yep, I think it's till
extension.
July 15th.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing is, I think those are the only two that we can actually possibly even fathom.
And that's what we kinda wanted to hear, so what are the two that you fathom? Then let us put that in and we'll say that, you know, based on input from the city, based on this and this, here's what the two that they'd like to go forward with, and here's what, a little bit more results from that.
That's what we can tell you.
Alright, and if you have any other questions or comments, just fire away emails and we'll get back to you. Thank you very much for listening to us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think